Hello, everyone. So wonderful to be with all of you, and really excited for the chance to have this time dedicated to a very important topic. Um, really appreciate this chance to be a part of this exciting week of knowledge exchange, ideation, and collaboration, and really want to say congratulations to the team at the Center for Financial Inclusion, who, again, for the 9th year, are pulling us all together, bringing together insights and voices from all over the world. And I'm particularly excited and grateful that gender is a prioritized topic. And to kick off, wanted to start off with some acknowledgements in terms of the organizations and individuals with whom I consulted to prepare for this conversation. And those include Women's World Banking, the Better Than Cash Alliance, Innovations for Poverty Action, Women's Empowerment and Digital Finance Program, known as We Define at the BRAC Institute of Governance and Development, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and my dear colleagues at the UPS Foundation, LaCarrie Jackson and Peace Bamidel. In terms of agenda for today, we have a lot that we're hoping to get through, and that includes 2 vignettes that I hope will help answer the question of why women. Then we'll spend a little bit of time assessing the current state of women. We'll turn then to some collective action opportunities with a 10-point plan and some very specific KPIs. I'll share a corporate use case as well as flag some resources and research that I hope everyone is aware of and has a chance to explore more to learn. And then we'll wrap with an announcement as well as some next steps. So to start, want to offer you 2 stories and introduce you to 2 women to help answer the question of why women. The first is a woman who came to the United States as a refugee, fleeing a revolution and seeking to create opportunities for herself as well as her 4 children. She was a single mom, and she came with 3 suitcases, $3,000, and very limited English. She landed in East Tennessee, and this was in 1985. And her formal financial journey began at a local credit union. And with her on her first visit was as a little girl. This was her youngest daughter, who could barely reach the countertop, but she could see the lollipops that were right next to the bank teller. This refugee and single mom got very lucky. While she certainly got a load of dirty looks every time she went to the grocery store and was using food stamps, which in the United States are subsidies from the government to help provide food security, she did not face racism or other types of prejudice that she was experiencing in her community from this financial service provider. Instead, this bank officer was patient with her and her language barrier and her insecurities and just the trauma and journey that she had been through to get to the United States. The bank teller actually took her into an office where she could have a little bit more privacy, where she could sit down and to be more comfortable. He did not judge the small amount that she had to deposit. And this institution instead went on to invest both in her financial education as well as that of her children. And that while her life was full of other challenges, she at least had a strong step forward in starting this financial journey. And by the way, that little girl who was eyeing those lollipops was me. Fast forward 16 years later to 2001, when I was a baby economist, I went to Benin, West Africa to study female participation in microfinance and asked to be introduced to some of the most successful as well as least successful participants of the microfinance, one of the microfinance programs that I was investigating. And I was introduced to a woman who was the second wife of a very abusive man, and she had a number of children, and she had done everything right. She had saved, she had borrowed, productively led a small and medium enterprise. She put her kids in school, was covering their school fees. And when it came time for her to buy a piece of land where she could relocate herself and her children, no one was willing to sell her a piece of land. She had the money, and guess what? The local laws had even been recently changed that would legally allow her to buy that land. But because of social and cultural norms, it was years stolen and lost before she could be able to create a safer, more productive, and more prosperous environment for herself and for her children. So, dear colleagues, I hope those two stories give a sense and hopefully an answer to the why women, and know that there are so many more stories out there that mirror these, both those that have happy endings as well as those that don't. So to transition to the current state of financial services for women, as well as just economic empowerment in general, I want to offer three numbers. The first number is 383 million. The second number is 4 times. And the third number is 14. So a word on each. The 383 million number is the number of women and girls who live in extreme poverty as of 2022, according to UN Women. And this number grew exponentially during the years of COVID, where we saw an erosion and a major step back in acceleration out of poverty and resilience. The 4 times number is the number of women more than men that will be displaced by climate change, and that's according to the UN. And the final number is 14, which comes to us from the World Bank's Women in Business and Law report, which tells us that only 14 countries out of 190 that were assessed have gender equality under the law for vital financial and economic indicators. I hope you agree with me that these conditions, these numbers are unacceptable, and it's clear how much work we have to do together. Only a couple of months ago, the G20 leaders convened under India's G20 presidency, and they recognized in their communique, yet again, that gender equality is of fundamental importance, and that investing in the empowerment of all women and girls has a multiplier effect in helping us to reach the 2030 agenda, which is the UN Sustainable Development Goals, those 17 SDGs we're all working towards. A few weeks later, in mid-September, many of us gathered in New York for the 2023 SDG Summit, which is the centerpiece of the high-level week of General Assembly meetings. And 2023 is marking really the beginning of this new phase of what we hope is accelerated progress towards these goals. And the summit discussed the urgency of taking such transformative and accelerated actions that can help us have a chance of getting to those 2030 goal deadlines. Indisputably, the global community stands at a critical juncture in pursuing gender equality, and specifically gender financial equality, which are both vital to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Some of you may have seen a recent piece that Melinda Gates put in The Economist. I wanted to share an excerpt of that. She says that when the global agenda gets crowded, gender equality is one of the first items to fall off. It's treated as a distraction from the world's most pressing problems, even though the data makes it clear it's a central part of the solution. Decades of data have shown that when women can fully participate in economies, it increases the financial stability for their households, it helps families recover, and it supports a country's resilience. In our time together, we will cover the context as we have in terms of the gender financial equality status, as well as some of the challenges and opportunities, especially through digitization and tech, and we'll highlight some specific concrete actions that key stakeholders, all of us across the public and private sectors, can take. Financial inequality remains a pervasive barrier to women's economic participation and empowerment, despite the strides that we've made over the years. And since I was in Benin, observing and learning as a baby economist. But the recent pandemic, climate shocks, and the escalating geopolitical tensions and the conflicts, they've exasperated and they will continue to have disproportionate effect on women and girls. While we meet here today, many leaders from across the public and private sector are just coming back from Morocco, from the annual meetings of the IMF and the World Bank, and they're going through their notes of discussions that they had on global concerns. Ajay Banga, the new president of the World Bank, from whom we've heard already, when he settled into his role as president of the World Bank, he declared gender and climate as levers for development, equity, and sustainability, and expressed the need for an annual investment of trillions of dollars to arrest the forces of climate change and fragility while simultaneously building up human capital and fighting inequality in health, education, and financial access. We know, and actually many of you, you're probably the choir to which we're preaching, if you chose to come to this session, you know already that financial access and usage is not a hoped for outcome, but really a prerequisite to improve the prosperity and resilience of women and girls. Women with access to financial services are better equipped to deal with shocks related to climate risks and to build their own resilience alongside the resilience of their families and their communities. Women are vital stewards of our planet's resources, especially in rural communities. Their role in managing water resources, food production, and livestock around the world not only makes women more vulnerable to climate change, but it also places them at the forefront of being a solution in battling the effects of climate change. You may be familiar, Mary Ellen Iskandarian, the CEO of Women's World Banking, has stated that nearly 1 billion women excluded from the formal financial services, leveling that financial playing field will enable women to survive and thrive in a world characterized by climate-related threats and risks. Interestingly, some of these foundational preconditions to be put into place to ensure that women build resilience to protect their families and communities from climate shocks are equal to the ones that are needed to bridge the digital gender divide and to ensure equitable access to financial systems to those 1 billion women that I mentioned. And part of this is a need for creation of gender intentional digital public infrastructure that can serve as a backbone for full participation of everyone in the modern economy. Yet we know that the digital infrastructure that currently exists, as well as others that are being built around the world, is often not as conscious of the gender differences as it should be. And so that's where we need investments from governments, the private sector, to help bridge the gender divide and ensure equitable access to financial services. So I hope that helps paint the stage where we need to go. And now I'm going to upload some slides to help us connect these words to action. It's so hard not having a live audience, but I'm going to assume that you guys are with me and that someone will scream at me via chat if you're not. But essentially, the wonderful news we have is that we have a collective action plan, including very specific KPIs and how we can measure the progress. And these 10-step action plan was actually created with a very robust evidence base and decades of innovation and tireless in-field activity. It builds upon the G20 Global Partnership for Financial Inclusion 2020 policy recommendations that was first launched in the build-up to what some of you may be familiar as the 2021 Generation Equality Forum. We have a number of organizations that we can thank for creating this 10-point action plan, and that includes the Better Than Cash Alliance, UN Women, the UN Secretary General's Special Advocate for Inclusive Finance, UNCDF, the UN Capital Development Fund, Women's World Banking, the World Bank, and the Generation Equality Forum. They all came together to create a second edition of this report. And so you see all their logos at the bottom of the slide. And this report is called Reaching Financial Equality for Women. The purpose of this plan is to really help mobilize both the private sector and governments to help undertake these actions. And exciting is that many countries have already started working on this. And here you see the 10 steps. I won't read through them, but will provide an example of good news, which it comes from Ethiopia. So Ethiopia made significant reforms and implemented initiatives to establish robust digital payment systems and ensure equitable access, affordability, and security to all of their citizens. Ethiopia's journey to being more gender intentional started with achieving the goal of gender parity and increasing women's presence in decision-making positions in government, a move that has led to more gender intentional policies and regulations being enacted. This move also cascaded into the private sector, with Ethiopia's largest bank, CBE, opening branches run solely by women as it seeks to empower more women to drive the financial inclusion agenda. So hopefully, as I was sharing that example from Ethiopia, you could see which of these 10 action steps were a part of their journey. So the good news is we have this plan, and now we need to connect this plan to action and through joint efforts from across the public and private sector with a number of different stakeholders. Financial sector regulators have a role as supporting the coalition and using gender disaggregated data to inform gender intentional policymaking. We have regulatory guidance for financial service providers to design and scale financial products for women. Financial service providers can invest in gender transformative business models to support resilience, asset building, and productive investment of women and women-owned businesses. For example, around private sector payments, donors and technical partners have a role and the responsibility to build gender intentionality into their program design and to develop financial mechanisms to de-risk capital and get financial products into women and women-led businesses. And civil society organizations, CSOs, can help raise awareness of the barriers to women's digital financial inclusion and advocacy for collaboration and access. And you'll all have access to these slides later, as well as the links to the websites. And here you'll see what I mentioned earlier in terms of those concrete KPIs, key performance indicators, where we can measure our progress and the efficacy of our efforts. So they're mapped against each of the actions, and they even offer sources of data where we can look at for comps and kind of baseline and to see where we're having progress. So want to turn over now to make it real, a use case. And some of you might be scratching your head. UPS is not a financial service provider, right? That's right, we're transportations and logistics, but wanted to provide an example to make it real on how you don't even have to be a financial service provider to play a role. And so wanted to share a little bit about how UPS is really taking an enterprise-wide approach to doing its part in advancing women's economic empowerment. The first, and we'll kind of do a tour of different business units across the company, is our marketing and sales teams, where they have a number of very creative efforts that are helping to empower a number of underrepresented and underserved economic actors, whether they're Black, LGBTQ, Hispanic, Asian, immigrant, small business owners. We've gotten artists who have decorated boxes that are used where you know that whatever product you just bought came from such a small business owner. And they've also really leveraged the power of marketing as it relates to raising awareness by engaging celebrity business leaders. We also have fortified and diversified our supply chains with women-owned businesses in partnership with a number of organizations. Our colleagues in public affairs have thought about the role of policy and regulations and laws and thinking about how to remove those barriers, whether it's for trade or other gender-specific barriers of participation into economic opportunities. And we've done those in collaboration with governments as well as industry associations. Of course, the corporate philanthropy has collaborated with national and international partners to support women-led micro businesses. And not last, and certainly not least, it has gone a long way in terms of the investment in female leadership and female decision-making, and how much having a female CEO and other leaders across all the levels of decision-making and governance of the institution in terms of our permission to operate and our permission to pursue advancing these goals. Our model includes leveraging 5 types of capital. So we're thinking about our human capital, the talent, the knowledge, and skills of our employees, our network capital, you heard, our supply chain, our relations with government stakeholders, our customers, our financial capital, both the OPEX from the balance sheet of the company, but then also the grant dollars and sponsorship dollars of the foundation, our intellectual capital, our core competencies. We know small businesses, and we have a number of products and services that support them, and really leveraging those to their full potential. And then our reputation capital, using our voice like today and helping to raise awareness wherever we can on the unique barriers, but then also unique opportunities for women to participate in making economic contributions. And along the way, we've had a lot of measurable impact. Across 5 years of efforts, we've reached over 107,000 women and diverse small businesses. And we've also learned a lot. We've learned what it takes in terms of full package of wraparound services that are not just limited to financial services, but that also is taking into account the network and knowledge that entrepreneurs and women participants of the economy need, and also thinking about the systems change approach that also requires policy, patience, partnerships, and connectivity. Wanted to also share this internal slide in a spirit of full transparency in terms of how powerful this 10-step action plan can be, in terms of it gave us a chance to self-assess. Where do we measure up? How do we measure up? And so we did kind of a quick and dirty stock taking across the 10 action steps and mapped kind of what some of our grants, some of our partnerships, how they mapped. And this is a really great exercise and something that I encourage all institutions to think about. There's no right or wrong here. There's unlikely to be any one organization that hits all 10 or that hits all 10 at the same time. And that's okay. Ideally, you're personalizing your actions towards your core competencies as an organization, aligned with your values and your resources. And, as you're assessing your current state, you might be looking into the future the next time you do a strategy refresh on what you might change, what you might add, or maybe which ones you continue to double down on in collaboration with others. In terms of resources and research, I hope all of you saw a very long list of links in the swap card for this session. And that was really designed to meet the goal of all of the sessions that you're participating this week as part of Financial Inclusion Week. Hopefully you're learning about things you didn't know, and you're finding different resources, different publications that you need to read to get smarter and to be aware of the latest. And so that was why you saw that long list of resources. Obviously have a link in there to the 10-point action plan that we discussed, the Economist piece from Melinda Gates that I referenced, as well as a link to a community practice known as FinEquity. If you don't know about it, you should. And it's a great place where you can come together, learn together, collaborate with others. And then there's a number of links to other sources and publications and recent research. So for example, there's a background paper in there that reflects an industry effort to harmonize indicators for women's economic empowerment. And then you've got tons of research across a number of geographies and topics, from Innovations for Poverty Action, BRAC, CGAP, Women's Role Banking, on topics like e-commerce, wage digitization, consumer protection, credit growth, credit with a focus on growth capital, not just startup, social and cultural norms, agency, mobile money, insurance, the list goes on. So do take a minute and look at those resources. And it goes without saying, the Center for Financial Inclusion's website and its blog have a number of resources as well. So take a minute, make a list, and take time going through each one and getting smart. To wrap, wanted to share some exciting news in our final few minutes. In terms of one of the links, it should be the second link in those list of resources, which is to an open letter. This open letter is one of the many efforts of the Women's Digital Financial Inclusion Advocacy Hub that was created to mobilize both bottom-up and top-down efforts across a coalition of a number of organizations, and really wanted to draw attention to this open letter and encourage all of you to think about how you, either as an individual or as an institution, might be able to join this movement and effort to commit to taking actions, whichever ones fit you. And I'm proud to say that UPS is honored to join as a signatory of this letter and urge all of you to think about how you too could consider joining. So finally, want to wrap by encouraging you to join the movement, whether it's by signing the letter, learning more about these resources, or joining the FinEquity community or others. Also would encourage you to save the date for November 6th. That will be the date of a kickoff of a large global campaign around these 10 action steps. Use the hashtag, spread the word, engage others, so that we can close the gap, and so that when we get together next year at the 10th anniversary of Financial Inclusion Week, we'll be celebrating progress that we've made. So with that, we have 5 minutes and want to see if there's any questions or comments. I'm happy to receive those. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. I'll just wrap by saying thank you. Thank you for investing in the time and participating in Financial Inclusion Week. I hope that you have an opportunity to learn something new, hear a differing opinion, share your thoughts as well, and really excited for the path ahead and looking forward to hearing the progress that we're making on closing the gender gap next year when we gather again. Thank you very much.